Hey guys, welcome back to Unlearn with Bianca, episode 5. If you are new here, then welcome. On this podcast, we explore everything self-healing, health, personal growth, relationships, and more. These episodes are here to educate you, they're here to challenge you so that you can deepen the connection that you have with yourself, the most important one. I hope you guys are having a good week so far. I know this can be a bit of a hectic time of the year as we cruise on into December, and I can't be the only one, but I cannot quite wrap my head around the fact that it is almost Christmas. It's just crazy. I am heading back to Christchurch back home next week, and I'm going to be there for a month running or doing some work and then celebrate this period with family and friends, which I'm really looking forward to. So, time is of the essence. Let's get straight into today's episode. On today's episode, I am going to share 8 things that have changed my life for the better. Some of these things are practices that I've adopted over time. Some of these are more mindsets that I have changed. I really just encourage you to stay open and take what you need. This is just me reflecting on some simple things that have really helped me improve my mental and physical health. And while I'm going through these, I'll also share some tips that I've kind of picked up along the way as well. I'm not sure how long this episode will be. I'm kind of freestyling today, so let's just jump straight in. Okay, first up, the first thing that has changed my life, taking personal responsibility and moving away from victim mentality. So what is victim mentality? It's that mindset that everything is happening to me. And when we are operating from this place, we really lose sight of the most important thing, which I believe is our choice in any given moment. Over the years, I've done a lot of self-reflection and really looking at where I have influence over my own choices and where I can take more personal responsibility. And then, of course, what areas I slip into around victim mentality from time to time, because we all go there from time to time. So don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean that I don't feel sorry for myself sometimes. Trust me, I do, because I do think it's really important that we allow ourselves to have those moments to acknowledge injustices. But I really want to come back to how important the stories and the narratives that we consistently repeat to ourselves are, because not only do they impact us at an identity level, but we stop seeing choices and opportunities to think and act differently. And this is when we slip into that victim mentality. So through my own reflections, I've really started to pick up some key signs to tell if we're heading towards victim mentality. I really think it starts with becoming more aware of where we're giving our power away through our language and our conversations. So the first example, we are in victim mentality if we do something called commiseration connection. And this is when we are connecting out of commiseration, as simple as it seems. So you may start to notice, wow, when I'm with these people, I only share my problems. Or maybe you just realize that you consistently end up in these conversations with these people where they are talking about other people, but you do feel like it's comfortable, or maybe you do low-key enjoy the drama or the gossip. That is a sign of victim mentality. Now, if we look at language more specifically, one of the fastest ways to notice if we are coming from victim mentality is if our language makes it feel like we have absolutely no choice. Because our language, you may have heard this before, but our language is like a spell. It drives what we find in our reality, what our brain starts to filter for. So some examples might be, nobody has my back. I am going to be stuck forever. Everybody leaves me. It's just in my genes. I wouldn't be good at that. These are generalizing statements that imply that we have absolutely no choice. A big one that I have noticed in myself that gets me into victim mentality is when I say, I have to do this. I have to help them. I have to go. No, I choose to go, or I get the privilege of going, because I believe we actually don't have to do anything. When we say we have to, it is implying that there is no choice. Another sentence that I have challenged myself on is I can't afford it. I've changed that to I can't afford that yet. Or maybe if I actually dig beneath that, it's just the fact that I don't value that thing. So what has really helped me move out of victim mentality is just to become aware of where I'm limiting myself through my conversations and with my language. And if you resonate to this, I'd really encourage you to pick an area that you've been feeling stuck in. Maybe it's relationships, maybe it's finances, friendships, in your workplace, and just start to get curious about what language you are using and the narrative that you keep repeating, because this will give you a clue if you are in that victim mentality. The second thing I started doing that changed my life for the better, I started to do exercise and pick exercise out of enjoyment. Doing exercise about 5 to 6 times a week, I've really tuned into what I enjoy doing, and I'm very well aware that this might change depending on what's going on for me in life and what season I'm in. So for you, this might look like going to the gym, it might look like walking, yoga, swimming, rock climbing, I don't know, anything, whatever works for you. But I think the really important thing here is allowing yourself to tune in to do exercise from a place of enjoyment and what your body actually wants during that time. I don't have to go through all the benefits of exercise. I'm sure we all know how important it is for our mental health, for our lymphatic system, just for our nervous system. But the key thing I want to get to here is the relationship we have with exercise. And I know this sounds really simple and you're probably thinking, yeah, Bianca, like this is common knowledge. But for me, I spent a lot of years of my life forcing myself to do workouts. So I used to do HIIT workouts probably 5 to 6 times a week that were keeping my nervous system in really high alert. And I did these workouts. Yes, I enjoyed them to an extent, but again, I was doing them out of what I thought I should be doing to keep me fit and healthy. So now I really enjoy doing a combination of low impact and high impact exercises that I genuinely enjoy, and it makes it so much easier to stick to a routine. When we can stick to our routines, this is really where we build that self-trust. And I believe that getting these really basic routines to build self-trust is what really builds the momentum. Because sometimes we don't have the energy to address everything that's going on in our life in detail, but we can still start with the body and just getting into routines and something as simple as exercise. Because what I've found for me is if I am feeling overwhelmed mentally, if I get into routines with exercise or if I get into routines with clearing my space, that is going to translate over to my mental health in a positive way. So just starting and committing to those routines with things we enjoy. Now, don't underestimate the power of just being active through daily movement. If anyone's interested, there's a really good documentary on Netflix. I think it's called Live to 100. It's around the blue zones. And I find it really interesting. A lot of these communities that live very long lives, they are just moving daily by getting up and down, by walking up hills, just simple movement. And I do feel like that is really important for our health. So a few tips that I've picked up that may help. If you can get exercise done in the morning, this is a win-win because you are hopefully getting some sunlight at the same time. So getting sunlight is really important in the morning for our circadian rhythm. And I will always start the day with some form of movement in the morning. It's the same if you're doing exercise in nature. That is a win-win because we all know how important nature is just for our overall nervous system health. And finally, if you are a female, I highly recommend looking into your menstrual cycle and the different hormonal changes we go through per month as females, because this can really guide you in choosing what movement is best for you during different phases of the month. This is something that has really, really helped me, and I hope to get someone on the podcast around this a bit further down the track. Okay, number 3, I have developed more compassion and acceptance for people knowing that they are doing the best they can with the resources they have. For example, if somebody is saying something really horrible, rather than getting frustrated like I would in the past, I am now at a place where I would be able to put my energy into feeling compassion for that person, because I think about how sad their life must be to put energy into that. They don't have the skills or the resources to respond to someone in a positive way. So when we understand this, we can move away from frustration and move more into compassion and acceptance. Another example might be when you notice that you're beginning to have more compassion and understanding for a parent who you held a lot of resentment over for not showing up in a certain way, because you're starting to realize that their responses and their reactions are purely based on the skills they have and what they know. I've also learned how important it is to stop spending energy on trying to prove our point of view to people that just have differing opinions. An example of this for me is when I first started this mind body work, I would see people were really stuck and they were looking for, ways to get their health back on track. And I knew what I did was really powerful. So I would say, oh, maybe you could do this. I'd send them the research. I'd speak to people. And what I learned is this resonated with some, but others just simply weren't open to hearing it, or they weren't open or ready to a different approach. And this used to really frustrate me because I used to have a lot of frustration around people that could not see a different perspective. I also used to be really good at just debating a point and, that black and white mindset, like, I can't believe you see it this way. God, that also used to cause me a lot of frustration. So what I have really been forced to practice over the years is just acceptance, non-judgment, because we only know what is best for ourselves. We do not know what is best for other people. Their choices are their choices. We can only work on ourselves. And that saves us a lot of energy. I think so often out of a good place, we try and help people, or we try and get them to see a different perspective. But people have their own lessons to learn. They have their own learnings to learn. They have their own experiences to go through, and we cannot block their path. So my takeaway, stay in your own lane, practice acceptance, compassion, and focus on yourself. The fourth thing that has changed my life for the better is educating myself on nutrition and what fuels my body, what feels good for my body. And again, I think this is going to differ from person to person, but what I've really realized over time is that I used to spend so much energy restricting certain foods, trying to figure out what everyone else was doing with their diet, or eating foods that I had placed a bad label on at the time, and then getting into this loop of guilt. That is not healthy. And a lot of these habits that I had with food were really driven from beliefs that I picked up a long time ago from very early years that many people share. So I had this period once in London where I really tracked what I consumed, and it was so eye-opening for me because I realized that I had not been eating enough. When I started eating more, I gained muscle, my skin improved, I lost more fat, my menstrual cycle became back on track after coming off the pill, and it just opened me up to really looking at things differently. So I think it's really important that not only we learn to educate ourselves around what we are fueling our body with, but also tuning into what works for ourselves personally, because there's so much information out there. I'm not a nutritionist, so I'm not going to go into this in too much detail. Maybe I can get someone on to talk about this further with us, but things that have worked for me, meal prepping and cooking from home. And that has really allowed me to know what is going into my food, and it also saves me money as well. So that's been really beneficial. Also making sure that I eat meals that contain a balanced amount of protein, fats, and carbs. I think the most important thing, though, if this applies to you, is changing the relationship with good versus bad food, because I now have got to this point where I will not limit myself to anything. I tune into what my body feels like and what feels best for me. And that has taken me a while to get to, but it's a really freeing point because I'm very aware that eating out of guilt has a really detrimental impact on the nervous system, and life is to be enjoyed. But I think it's really important that we tune into what feels good for our body. And of course, seek some support in this area if this is all new, but hopefully this is a good place to start. Number 5 of things that have changed my life for the better, getting honest with my emotions. Guys, this is so important because when we keep avoiding our emotions, this will impact us eventually. I believe life will either shake us up to make us acknowledge how we truly feel, or stored emotions will impact our health. Okay, so here's a few things. The first thing is I have been actively practicing when people ask me how I am. I've been actively practicing creating space first to check in to how I am before answering with a I'm fine, yeah, good, and actually being honest, especially with those I feel safe around. I don't know if anyone relates to this, but I in the past have had that feeling of being too sensitive, too much, too emotional, and over time I kind of learned to just get on with it, to suck it up. I feel like a lot of us feel this way. And as we start to block out emotions or not bring in the space to feel our emotions, we then start to numb out with food, with sex, with shopping, with exercise, or like I said, our body starts getting chronic symptoms. So back to the being honest with myself, I learned this a lot through grief. It's really forced me to get honest. And I'm very well aware that it's really uncomfortable for people to sit with and be with big emotions, especially an emotion like grief where there's no immediate fix or there's no fix at all. But for me, if someone asked me how I was, I didn't really mind how they responded. For me, it was about being honest for myself. It wasn't about trauma dumping. It was just a simple acknowledgement of saying, no, today I'm not feeling great, or today I'm doing good, but actually getting honest with myself. It's so important because people are not mind readers. When we practice honesty with ourselves, I then think we can be more honest with others. And that's when we build those really deep connections. And guys, this is uncomfortable. Like I still find myself reverting to the old habit of cushioning my responses to people or just giving a response without really thinking. But over time, I have realized that I am more aware of being able to identify what emotions I'm feeling and actually giving myself space to acknowledge or to feel that. And I think I'll do a whole episode on this because we live in a world where for many of us, things are so busy, it's even hard to connect to the particular feeling or emotion that's coming up and where that actually is felt in our body. I've also really practiced honesty in my communication and relationships. And as somebody who used to engage in a lot of jumping into other people's shoes and over-empathizing or avoiding hurting people, I would connect with people at my own expense sometimes. And then what would happen is my true feelings would build up and then I might have like this impatient Aries outburst. So I've started to practice vocalizing my expectations and my needs and my feelings without guilt. This is the most important bit, without guilt. And getting really clear that in a way that somebody can understand, practicing clarity and not over-explaining. And this really takes trusting that your opinion and your needs are valid. And some people might say, well, if I set boundaries, if I speak up, that's selfish or it's too much. And I promise you, you are not selfish. Boundaries and stating our needs are there to teach others how we want to be treated and setting the tone in that way. Number 6, the 6th thing that has changed my life is to be constantly learning. I believe that our brain needs a challenge. It needs to stay active. And something that I really value is learning. That might be through reading, that might be through listening to a podcast, having a really good conversation. It might be more of a creative pursuit and building a skill in that way. But this all activates a different part of our brain. I think when we stay curious, this is such an important piece of our mental health. Sometimes I get asked the question around people that are unhappy in their job, and they say, well, what do you think I could do if I don't like my job and I want to go more into this area, or I don't even know what I want to do, but I really want to leave my job? What I would say is start to add something else to your life. Start to get curious, start to learn. Maybe start listening to a nightly podcast to spark your brain in that way. If you want to head into something more creative with your work, maybe start to practice that on the side. This kind of novelty or learning can really help light us up and things start to open in that way. Like that's how I started with this work. I was in a job that I couldn't leave, but I started doing some learning on the side. I started reading books. I started listening to podcasts. Then I moved into studying, and it all kind of happened organically. So stay creative and keep learning. Number 7 is making space for solo time. Any time you can take throughout your day to be with yourself. It might be waking up and having your first coffee by yourself, maybe a lunch break walk by yourself, 5 minutes before bed to journal, even in the shower, being really present with yourself. These moments are really crucial because this gives us space to hear our own thoughts amongst the busy lives and amongst the noise. Some of you may have seen I was really lucky to go to Bali this year. And I did that intentionally, and I know that's very much a privilege, but I did that intentionally so that I could spend time with myself. I needed clarity. I needed to kind of be with myself to figure out my next steps. And I think what happens when we are with ourselves, we can get used to our own energy, and then we have more discernment around how we feel when we step back into certain environments, when we are around different people, and it kind of creates this space so we can become more objective, away from the roles and the responsibilities and the hamster wheel of life. Now, for my introverts, I do believe that there is such thing of too much alone time, because as humans, we are wired for connection, and I really do think that we grow and we heal in community. If we think of like a continuum, there is hyper-independence on one side, and then there is codependence on the other side. So codependence is when our state is reliant on someone else's state. But hyper-independence is when we are very independent and we have this, I'll do it all by myself mentality. Now, somewhere in the middle, there's this thing called interdependence. And this is what I think we should be aiming for. It's when we're comfortable being independent, but we're also comfortable on connecting and relying on others. For example, in a romantic relationship, an interdependent person recognizes the value of vulnerability and being able to turn to their partner in ways to create emotional intimacy. But they also value the sense of self that allows them and their partner to be themselves without needing to compromise who they are or their own value system. So to sort of circle back and wrap this point up, I believe that taking time, solo time with ourselves is really important for us so that we can learn about who we are and what our needs are and what our values are, but also recognizing that there is a balance and understanding the importance of community, being able to rely on people and be vulnerable with people. It is a practice of finding a balance between both. And number 8, the final thing that has changed my life for the better, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. As humans, we are creatures of habit. And I would say that I was a cautiously comfortable person, and I operated in a comfortable way until many events in my life really forced me to get out of my comfort zone. And through gaining that trust in myself and realizing I have come through every challenge, I now really embrace the feeling of pushing past mental barriers and having a challenge and really kind of getting into new experiences, because I really believe that this is such an integral part of the human experience. Honestly, guys, I've got a bit of a drastic example, and I'm sure, you can understand with the last few years I've kind of gone through this like reintegration, figuring out my next steps process. So I make a lot of decisions based on my intuition. And I ended up packing up my stuff in Christchurch in May. I went to Bali for a month and I didn't know what I was going to do next. I came back through Melbourne. I did some house sitting there. And then I got back and decided to move to Auckland. And what was really interesting is this all happened very naturally because all of the opportunities presented themselves one after the other when I decided to take that first step, make the decision, and step out of my comfort zone. I knew that what was on the other side of fear would be far greater than the discomfort of knowing that I should be in a different location. And yes, I sat on that decision for ages until it got to the point where I was like, no, I have to do something. And I thought, when am I ever going to have this freedom again without responsibility that I can move around like this? So I did it. And I often think, why do we continually stay in things for so long until we really feel that deep stuckness? I think it's because so many of us like to make life as predictable as possible because it's better to know what we already know than what we don't know. And, my example is a bit of an extreme one. And if you're really happy, this isn't going to apply to you. But if you do feel a little bit stagnant, think about where can you start to take some uncomfortable steps. This is very important for our brain. So it could just be changing up your space. It could be doing a different walk, different than the one you usually go on. Maybe putting on a piece of clothing that you've been wanting to wear, but you just haven't quite had the courage to do because it's different and it's out there. Doing a class, talking to somebody that has a completely different perspective. The more we get uncomfortable, the more that we are teaching our brain that change can be safe, and we are changing our relationship with fear and the unknown. And I can truly say for myself that the best things I've done have always been after I've gone through a huge amount of fear and then I've just taken the next step. So I hope this just encourages you to think about where you just might want to shake things up a little bit, change things up if you are feeling like you've just become a little bit stagnant and you want some change. Okay, guys, we are getting to the end of this podcast. I'm going to quickly recap on the 8 different things that have changed my life. Number 1, take personal responsibility and getting out of victim mentality. Number 2, choosing to do exercise that I actually enjoy and creating a routine from that. Number 3, accepting people as they are and showing compassion. Number 4, educating myself on nutrition. 5, getting honest with my emotions. 6, continuing to learn. 7, taking solo time. And number 8, getting comfortable with uncomfortability. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening. I'd love to hear what you've taken from this episode. I really have enjoyed just putting my thoughts out there freely. It's really helping me channel a lot of things that have been on my mind that I just haven't gotten out in the last few years. I have some really exciting offerings coming up in the new year. I've been working on a few things. I've also got my lightning process trainings in the new year online. So if you are interested, please reach out. You can reach out through Instagram, neuro.spark. Otherwise, you'll find my email in the show notes. If there's something in particular you'd love me to talk about on the podcast, please reach out. Also got some really cool interviews coming up, so make sure you're following along for that. And until then, I hope you guys have a beautiful week. See you next time.